Where's Harry? The Duke of Sussex is criticised for not appearing in court on the first day of his case against the Mirror group of newspapers. His lawyer said he flew in last night after celebrating his daughter's birthday, but he's been accused of wasting court time. Also this lunchtime.
I imagine that you might have been feeling a lot like I have. Shaken, troubled, let down, worried for the well-being of people on all sides of what's been going on.
Holly Willoughby on Philip Schofield as this morning's editor is criticised for his response to the crisis. Death by drowning. An inquest opens into the Bournemouth Beach tragedy that cost 2 young lives. And a journey to remember, a journey for remembrance. The D-Day veterans travelling to Normandy.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Prince Harry has been accused of wasting time by not being available to give evidence in his own case against the publisher of the Mirror newspapers. Lawyers for the Mirror group said it was absolutely extraordinary that he would not be available for day one of his own trial. The judge hearing the case expressed his surprise over the Duke of Sussex's absence. Prince Harry's lawyer said he flew in last night as he was celebrating his daughter's birthday yesterday. He's suing Mirror Group newspapers for damages, claiming its journalists were linked to unlawful methods, including phone hacking. Our correspondent Rebecca Barry is at the High Court. So, Rebecca, Prince Harry wasn't present today, but what did happen in court?
Well, you only need to look at the huge number of TV crews and journalists here to understand the interest and the significance of this case. They're here to document a moment in history when tomorrow Prince Harry becomes the first senior royal to appear in a court witness box for more than a century. He has said that it's his life's work to change the media landscape, describing it as a duty. But this is also a deeply personal battle for him. He blames press intrusion for the death of his mother and says that it's caused him huge bouts of paranoia and depression. This case against Mirror Group newspapers is one of 3 that he's bringing against 3 different newspaper groups, accusing them of phone hacking and blagging or using deception to get hold of his private information. This morning, Prince Harry's barristers told the court that even when he was a schoolboy, even after the death of his mother, during his time at Sandhurst and as a young adult, nothing was sacrosanct. It's claimed that Mirror Group newspapers used 30 different private investigators to unlawfully gather his private information. The court heard that every facet of his private life was published in full Technicolor glory because stories about him drove sales. A story too good not to publish. Now, Mirror Group newspapers have in the past admitted and apologised for phone hacking, but they only admit one instance of unlawful information gathering against Prince Harry in 2004 in an article about him at a nightclub. But Prince Harry's barristers say it's implausible that there was only one instance of it. Now, as you say, Prince Harry flew in from LA last night after attending his daughter Lilibet's birthday, and the judge did say that he was a little surprised that he wasn't here this afternoon on standby, just in case they get time for him to begin his evidence. He will be cross-examined for a day and a half when he appears here tomorrow, and I think he will face some very tough and awkward questions. Some of the articles being examined in this trial are about him taking drugs, about him dressing up in a Nazi uniform. It is quite literally the opposite of the royal family's mantra of never complain, never explain, and it will be awkward listening for them too, and perhaps not help tensions between the family members. Certainly in court tomorrow, it will be an experience that none of us sitting in that courtroom have ever witnessed before.
Rebecca Barry, thank you. Holly Willoughby returned to This Morning today, her first appearance on the programme since the departure of Philip Schofield. She told viewers that she felt shaken, troubled, let down and worried by events that led to her co-presenter leaving the show. Earlier, the programme's boss was accused of making deeply inappropriate comments in response to accusations of a toxic culture on the show. Sam Holder has the latest.
Their names used to appear side by side. On her return to This Morning, Holly Willoughby immediately addressed the exit of Philip Schofield, her co-presenter of 13 years.
Right, deep breath. Firstly, are you okay? I hope so. It feels very strange indeed sitting here without Phil. And I imagine that you might have been feeling a lot like I have. Shaken, troubled, let down, worried for the well-being of people on all sides of what's been going on, and full of questions.
Questions too remain of what bosses on This Morning knew about Philip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague. Holly Willoughby reiterated that she was in the dark.
You, me, and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth.
ITV says it investigated rumours of a relationship in 2020, but it was denied by both Schofield and his colleague. Schofield has also denied grooming the younger man. The affair has put This Morning in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Former presenters and staff have accused the programme of a toxic culture, accusations that were put to editor Martin Frizzell.
I'll tell you what's toxic, I've always found toxic, is aubergine. Do you like aubergine? Do you?
Is there a toxic work environment?
But do you like aubergine? Because I don't like aubergine. It's just a personal thing.
Is there a toxic work environment at This Morning?
It's a really
sir?
big day today, though, because John Turrode's back with spicy barbecue prawns.
His answers were described as deeply inappropriate and disrespectful by one MP who's part of a parliamentary committee looking at ITV's handling of events. The channel's chief executive, Dame Carolyn McCall, has been asked to give evidence when it meets next week. With much of the focus on events off-screen, there is a looming on-screen question for This Morning. Now Holly Willoughby has returned, who will replace Philip Schofield? Sam Holder, ITV News.
Russia says it has thwarted what it describes as a large-scale assault by Ukrainian forces in the eastern Donetsk region. In an early morning video, the Russians' military chief spokesperson claimed to have repelled attacks in 4 different areas. Kyiv has suggested it is part of a misinformation campaign. John Ray, who has just returned from Ukraine, joins me now. Is this the start of a much-anticipated counter-offensive then, or not?
Nina, I think we have to be really cautious about this. There are very few at least, eyewitnesses on the ground. What we do have is this video put out by the Ministry of Defence in Moscow. As you say, it shows what looks like an armoured assault, so tanks and so forth. The Kremlin said, along front line, you get the feeling that we are in a fresh stage of the counter-offensive. Perhaps that bit where Ukraine is probing, looking for weaknesses, trying to throw the Russians off guard. Silence is all we've had, though, from Kyiv today. Have a look at this social media posting that they made. The message is really, really, really clear. Please, no one talk about what's going on, because they really need to keep the Russians guessing about where and when they will strike.
If it has started, though, either overnight or in recent weeks, what does success look like?
Ukraine desperately needs to change the narrative now. It needs this war to stop being bloody and attritional, and it needs to be a war in which they are clearly winning, not least to convince their Western backers that all those weapons, all that political support is actually going to, in the end, bear fruit. Where are they going to strike? Well, we don't know. Perhaps east in the Donbass to throw Russia back to where it was in 2014. More likely, perhaps, to the south. There's that enormous land corridor that the Russians have taken possession of. If Ukraine can get through there, then it threatens Crimea. That becomes then a very, very big prize for Kyiv. But so many unknowns, Nina. We've got the Ukrainians are fighting with an army that is fresh, newly trained, up to what they call NATO style, but they're untested in battle. Who knows how they're going to perform? And of course, they're going to be coming up against Russian soldiers who have had months and months and months to dig in really effective defences.
John Ray, thank you very much. Thank you. An inquest into the deaths of 2 young people just off Bournemouth Beach has found they died of drowning. Joe Abbess, who was 17, and 12-year-old Sana Khan died in hospital on Wednesday after getting into difficulty in the sea. Our reporter Chloe Oliver was in court and joins us now from Bournemouth Beach. What exactly did the coroner say this morning, Chloe?
Well, the coroner believes initially that the cause of death for both children was drowning, and it's thought a riptide could have pulled them both under the water, but that hasn't yet been confirmed. 12-year-old Suna Khan and 17-year-old Joe Abbas were swimming in the sea behind me close to Bournemouth Pier when they, along with 8 others, got into difficulty last Wednesday. Well, paramedics tried to save them and they were airlifted to hospital but sadly died. In a tribute last night, Suna's mother said, "I've lost my beautiful daughter. She was so well loved. No parent should ever have to go through what her dad and I are going through." There's also been tributes from Joe's family who say he was a kind and generous trainee chef with a bright future ahead of him. There has been some criticism today from Bournemouth East MP Tobias Elwood about Dorset Police's investigation, and he says there's been a real lack of clarity around that. However, Dorset's Police and Crime Commissioner have come back and said that this is a complex case, saying they're working as fast as they can. Well, police are asking people not to speculate around what happened and to show some respect for the families of those who died here so tragically.
Chloe Oliver, thank you very much. Thank you. Still to come, pardoned after 20 years in jail, the Australian mother once branded the country's worst female serial killer. And the generosity of strangers, the cabbies taking D-Day veterans back to the Normandy beaches. But first, the Prime Minister has set out the state of migration into the UK. It follows months of increasing pressure on Rishi Sunak with regards to the numbers crossing the Channel on small boats. Here's our political correspondent, Romilly Weeks.
We're talking to the team about it. Actually, the number of arrests over the last year has gone up considerably.
The Prime Minister was out in the Channel this morning on patrol with a Border Force boat and keen to point to progress in his central pledge to voters, that he will stop small boats carrying migrants making the same journey.
Our approach is working. For the first time, crossings are down by 20%. But we are not complacent. This won't be solved overnight, and people will continue to come this summer, which is why it is so important that we change the law.
Since his small boats promise was made 5 months ago, the PM wanted to highlight some improvement. Between January and June last year, there were more than 12,500 small boat crossings. The latest figures show that's dropped to more than 7,500 over the same period this year, with the number of Albanians making the crossing down by 90%. The government says the backlog of old asylum cases awaiting a decision is also down from over 90,000 to around 74,500 since December. However, if you look at the total backlog, including new cases, it's actually gone up from just over 136,000 to 137,500. Experts say the drop in crossings might not be down to the government alone.
Past research suggests that policy is one factor that affects the number of people, but it's usually not the most important. Other random things like how many people are being displaced from different countries around the world, or the weather, or even just how information flows through networks can have a really important impact.
This asylum seeker who wants to remain anonymous has been waiting for a decision on her claim for 7 months.
I lock myself and cry. I battle with depression most of the time because, one, it's not like you even know your next move. It's not like you know how long you will stay there.
Rishi Sunak also said 2 more barges had been secured to help house asylum seekers and that other large sites will open over the summer. What he wouldn't say is when his oft-repeated pledge to stop the boats will be achieved. Romilly Weeks, ITV News.
An Australian woman who spent 20 years in prison for killing her 4 children has been pardoned after new scientific evidence found they may have died from natural causes. Kathleen Folberg was convicted of the murder of 3 of her children and the manslaughter of her eldest son after they all died suddenly between 1989 and 1999. But now an inquiry into her conviction has found there was reasonable doubt as to her guilt. Barbara Holmes has the details.
my God. I am so elated, it's not funny. I'm nervous and I'm everything. Oh.
Freed after serving 2 decades in prison for killing her 4 children. It's a story that's gripped Australia.
She spent 20 years in prison, considered Australia's worst female serial killer. But right now, Kathleen Folbig is enjoying her first few hours of freedom.
Between 1989 and 1999, Kathleen Folbig's 4 children all died suddenly when they were aged between 19 days and 19 months. Initially, it was believed that Caleb, Patrick, Sarah and Laura all died from sudden infant death syndrome, until their father, Craig Folbig, presented police with his ex-wife's diaries. They were used as evidence of her guilt, and in 2003 she was convicted of murdering 3 of her children and of the manslaughter of her eldest son. 2 decades later, and new scientific evidence emerged that her children carried genetic mutations that may have caused their deaths. An inquiry into her conviction found there was reasonable doubt as to her guilt.
This has been a terrible ordeal for everyone concerned, and I hope that our actions today can put some closure on this 20-year-old matter.
Her campaign team watched on, emotional and relieved, but their work could still continue. Her convictions have not been quashed. That would require further legal proceedings. But for now, she is grateful for her freedom and the friends that stood by her all these years.
I can't thank everybody enough for all of the support and all of the hard work that's gone into reaching this moment.
A moment that must carry much relief after so many years of heartbreak. Barbara Holmes, ITV News.
The chair of the inquiry held following the terror attack at Manchester Arena in 2017 has been hearing of the changes implemented since his report. 22 people were killed in the suicide bomb attack at an Ariana Grande concert. Amy Welsh is there. What has been said today, Amy, and how have the families reacted to it?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the families are cautiously optimistic about these changes. They waited 6 years to find out the truth about what happened that night, and a public inquiry exposed a catalogue of failings at every level. A fire service which didn't turn up for 2 hours, a police service which didn't communicate, and an ambulance service which only sent 3 paramedics in to help while the dying lay injured in need of that help. Well, today SMG gave evidence on behalf of the arena's security. Their security lapses allowed Salman Abedi to slip through the net, and they told the inquiry they give their full backing to Martin's Law, a bill being spearheaded by the mother of Martin Hett, who died in the attack, and which would call for tighter security at all venues, which considers the threat of terrorism. They added that all their staff are now medically trained and that first aid kits are available to the public, which carry stretchers and bleed kits. Well, earlier I spoke to Steve Goodman. He lost his granddaughter, Olivia Campbell-Hardy, and says he does not want any other family to suffer the way that they have.
Yeah, I think they're talking the talk and they're saying that they've implemented things. They seem to have done well if what they're saying is going to be carried through. If it's just going to be lip service, then it means nothing.
Well, there is no legal obligation for any of these public bodies to implement any of these recommendations. But in a city which has suffered so much, it is vital that the organisations that failed do not fail again.
Amy Welsh, thank you. Finally, the Black Cab Journey with a Difference. A fleet of taxis has transported a very special group of passengers to France ahead of a remembrance service for the D-Day landings in Normandy. Sally Biddulph on the Veterans Visit.
A taxi convoy with very special passengers arrives at Portsmouth Ferry Terminal. Full of memories, 12 military veterans who lived through D-Day are about to travel back to the landing beaches of Normandy.
I remember thinking if it was, well, the crossing at night, while I was awake, thinking it was a nice adventure. When I woke up about 5 o'clock in the morning and saw the coastline, I rather felt differently.
Mervyn Kirsch arrived on Gold Beach 4 days after the initial landing. By the end of June, Doug Baldwin followed. He was just 18.
I get tongue-tied about it all, because there are lots of things I could tell you about, but I was captured on the 8th of August, so I was living like an animal for about a month in holes in the ground, And once you start doing that, you become to think like an animal. And your senses, it's hard to explain.
Many of these veterans have returned to Normandy multiple times, each one deeply affected by the part they played. Marie Scott was a wireless operator working in a secret location in Portsmouth.
I'm always very moved by it, very moved, because to me, I can only basically think that some of those people maybe that I was talking to on that day may have died.
For the volunteer cabbies making the journey for charity, it is simply an honour.
Why do we do it? Because we love to give something back to those that gave so much for us in the Second World War. We like to take them to see where their friends may have fallen, their comrades, and also for them to be with other like-minded people.
At the heart of the trip is a service at the British Normandy Memorial tomorrow on the 79th anniversary of D-Day. Forever poignant for 102-year-old Arnhem veteran Bill Lawson.
It ought to be remembered, and I think we should still keep coming along to show that we remember them.
Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
Mary's here with the evening news at 6:30 from me and everyone on today's Lunchtime team. Bye-bye.